Hey, you guys, this week we're talking about a serious subject that most adults don't want to talk to you about, and that is dying. And yesterday we learned that everyone dies and that God has the number of days that you live written down in a book, and He already knows and plans it ahead of time. And some of us get more days than others, and that's okay because all of us, even after we die and leave this earth, are going to live forever somewhere. And it is called, what was it called? Eternity. Eternity. Say it with me. Eternity. Eternity. You're going to live forever somewhere. Now, but we learned yesterday that you have to believe. And what do you have to believe? That Jesus is God's Son and that He died and He rose again. Now, in the Bible, when Jesus was really alive, He had 12 friends, okay? They were called His disciples, and they went everywhere with Jesus, and they saw Jesus die on the cross, and they knew that He was buried in a tomb, and the tomb was sealed. Now, on the morning when Mary and the other ladies went to the tomb and they saw that Jesus was not there anymore, right? And they ran back to all their friends and said, Jesus is not there anymore. He's risen. He's alive. And He told the other disciples, right? Well, they were waiting for Jesus to come back and to see them because Jesus had told them that He would be back. And so there they are waiting, and Jesus comes and meets them. The Bible says in John chapter 20, verse 19, and on the evening of that day, the first day of the week, are you ready? The doors were locked where the disciples were because they were afraid. These people had killed Jesus and they were afraid too. But Jesus came and stood among them, the Bible says, and He said, peace be with you. He was like, it's okay. Don't be afraid. I'm here. Peace be with you. And when He had said this, He showed them His hands because that's where He had been nailed to the cross. He showed them the scar. When I was a little girl, I was playing on my monkey bars, and I was swinging across, and there was one of those screws that held the monkey bars together, and a lot of times my daddy would put a cover over that screw so it wouldn't hurt you when you ran into it. But on this one day, it didn't have the cover on it, and I was swinging really hard, and boom, I hit my knee on that screw and cut it open, and it started bleeding. And to this day, I still have a scar on my knee from hitting that screw so hard and cutting the skin open. There was a scar. Well, that's what Jesus is saying. He's like, look, see my hand. See where the nails went in my hand. And then He said, see my side. And He showed them His side because that is where the sword, they pierced Him with the sword. And then the disciples were so glad. It says, I love that. Okay. And Jesus said to them again, peace be with you. Be calm. And they visited. Now, while they were doing this, one of the disciples wasn't there. Wouldn't that be my luck? Would that be your luck? I wonder if he was out going to the restroom or something. Stuff always happens when I got to run to the potty. But I don't know where he was or what he was doing, but he wasn't there. And so when He comes back, it says, now Thomas, in verse 24, now Thomas, one of the 12, he was called the twin because he was probably a twin. So if you're a twin out there, hey, twinsers, okay, called the twin, was not with them when Jesus came. So that the other disciples said, we've seen the Lord. We have seen the Lord. They were so excited. They're like, you're not going to believe this. He's alive. He's not dead. I promise you, I know we saw Him die on the cross. We know He was buried in the tomb, but we've seen Him. We touched His hands, right? We saw His side where the Spirit went in. They were so excited. And listen to what Thomas said. Thomas said, unless I see Him, unless I see His hands, unless I see the mark of the nails and place my finger right in that mark of the nails or place my hand into His side, I will not believe. Now, what about you? You haven't seen that Jesus is alive. You've never been able to touch His hands. You've never seen His scar on His side, but do you believe Jesus is alive? Thomas doubted. Thomas didn't believe, and you're going to have to decide for yourself. Do you believe Jesus is alive? Because your eternity, your life forever, your life in heaven depends on if you believe Jesus is alive. Okay, now listen to what happened to Thomas. Because he said, I'll never believe this unless I see it with my own eyes. So poor Thomas, he didn't believe. Everybody else was like, I saw Jesus. I saw his hand. I saw his side. I believe. But poor Thomas, he didn't believe. But guess what happened? 8 days later, count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 days later, okay, Jesus' disciples were inside again, all right, and Thomas was with them this time. Yay for Thomas. And the doors were locked again, and Jesus came and stood among them. It's still in John chapter 20, okay? Verse 27, and Jesus 26, he came and stood among them, and guess what he said again? He said, peace be with you. Jesus like, be calm, don't be afraid. It's me, I'm here. And then he looked at Thomas, and he said to Thomas, Thomas, put your finger right here. Thomas, he got to touch Jesus, even though he didn't believe. He got to touch Jesus' hand. And then he said, Thomas, look, see my hands? He said, put your hand out. Place it right here in my side. And Thomas felt the scar. He felt where Jesus had been pierced by the sword. And then listen to what he said. He said, do not disbelieve, Thomas, but believe. Listen to Miss Stephanie. This is so important. You have to believe. If you want to spend eternity forever, okay, in heaven with God, then you have to believe that Jesus is God's son. He's perfect. And he came to earth and he died just like we're going to die. But he rose again and he lives now in heaven. Listen to how Thomas, what do you think Thomas said? Do you think he believed or didn't believe? Thomas answered him, my Lord, my God. He knew right in that moment it was Jesus. He recognized him. He said, my Lord, my God, it's you. It is you. And Jesus said to him, Thomas, have you believed because you've seen it? And then he said, this is important because he was talking about you and he's talking about me. He said, blessed are the people who believed but never saw and have not seen. That's us, you guys. If we believe that Jesus died and he rose again, even though we've never seen him with our eyes, but we've heard about him. And we know in our hearts because we experience God and we know that Jesus is God's son and he died for us and rose again. Jesus said, blessed are you if you believe. And here's the thing you got to know. If you believe Jesus is God's son and you believe he rose from the dead and he's alive and he's in heaven and you say, I believe it and I know that he loves me, he died for me and I want to follow him, you will spend eternity in heaven with Jesus forever. So you don't have to be afraid of dying. You don't have to be angry. You don't even have to be sad. Even though it's okay to be sad because you're going to miss people, you can know that you will be in heaven forever. And this is why it's important that you tell others about Jesus, because you want everyone to be in heaven with you, right? Don't you? Yes, you do. So you have to tell them about Jesus. You have to tell them about eternity. And you have to tell them it's okay that we're going to die because we can know where we're going to spend forever. Hey, do not disbelieve, but believe. You can spend eternity in heaven if you believe.